20th century music. Musical styles between 1900 and 1945. Extremes of violence and progress marked the 20th century. During the first half of the century, two world wars in 1914 to 1918 and in 1939 to 1945 unleashed new weapons of unpredictable, destructive force. Between the wars, dictatorships and global depression caused massive hardship. The second half of the century saw a breakup of colonial empires, an extended Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, a nation that later dissolved, and armed conflicts around the world. Extraordinary acceleration in developments in technology and service transformed politics and society. The Wright brothers made the first powered flight in 1903. 66 years later, humans walked on the moon. A flood of new technologies, including sound recordings, movies, radio, satellites, computers, and the integrated, triggered, and continuous revolution in communications. In the arts, as in other aspects of life, there was increased emphasis on pluralism and diversity. Contradictory styles and tendencies coexisted as conservative avant-garde works appeared at the same time. Moreover, individual artists such as Picasso and the composer Igor Stravinsky often alternated between radical and more traditional styles. Musical styles between 1900 and 1945. In the music, as in other arts, the early 20th century was a time of revolt. The years following 1900 saw more fundamental changes in the language of music than any time since the beginning of the Baroque era. There were entirely new approaches to the organization of pitch and rhythm, and a vast expansion of the vocabulary of sounds, especially percussive sounds. Some compositions broke with tradition so sharply that they were met with violent hostility. The most famous riot in music history occurred in Paris in 1913 at the premiere of Igor Stravinsky's ballet, The Rite of Spring. Police had to be called as hecklers booed, laughed, made animal sounds, and actually fought with those in the audience who wanted to hear Stravinsky's evocation of primitive rites. It was a riot, which was probably what Stravinsky wanted to help his career. Impressionism and symbolism. Many different musical styles coexisted around the beginning of the 20th century. Among the most important was Impressionism, best represented by the music of French composer Claude Debussy. Music was influenced by an art movement that started in the 1870s. The Impressionist movement was led by Claude Monet, whose painting entitled Impressionism Sunrise was where the term was acquired. Impressionist painters were concerned primarily with the effects of light, color, and atmosphere, with appearance, change, and fluidity. The Impressionist painters broke with traditional depictions of reality. Writers called symbolists rebelled against the conventions of French poetry. Like the painters, poets emphasized fluidity, suggestion, and the purely musical or sonorous effects of words. Impressionist painting and symbolist poetry were the driving force for many developments during the 20th century.